In the heart of our nation's capital sits the Museum of the Bible. One of DC's newest attractions, it is a 6-story, state-of-the-art salute to Scripture. On a cold winter afternoon this past January, I visited the museum. I'd come to DC to chaperone our upper school's 11th grade trip to participate in the Litakain Seminar, a conference which gets its name from the Jewish value of tikkun olam, repair of the world. Over 4 days, the students identify issues they care deeply about and study Jewish perspectives on them. Then they go to Capitol Hill and actually lobby the offices of their members of Congress about these issues. Every year, they inspire me with their wisdom, poise, and passion. Our goal in participating in this program is to help our students embrace their obligation as American Jews to raise their voices on the issues affecting their future. In January, while our teens toured some of the capital city's other museums and monuments, I peeled off for this little side quest. I had heard rumors about the nefarious nature of the Museum of the Bible, and I wanted to see it for myself. What I experienced there disturbed me. As I toured the museum's exhibits on the history of the Bible and its impact on America, I noticed many subtle falsehoods and omissions. For example, near the end of the main gallery, I spotted this giant painting of George Washington at Valley Forge. The plaque told me that Washington knelt in a moment of solitary prayer, seeking guidance and strength from God. It declared that it was one of the most crucial moments in the American Revolution. What the placard fails to mention is that this story is a myth. There are no eyewitness accounts of Washington praying at Valley Forge. And further, the image is not consistent with the historical facts about the man. Washington resisted public displays of religiosity. As one biographer noted, he avoided referring to Jesus in his letters, attended religious services irregularly, did not kneel during prayer, and often dodged out of church before communion. The story first appeared in a book written 80 years after the Revolution, a mythologized biography by an Episcopal priest named Parson Weems, who had an agenda to portray the president as pious. The tall tale of Washington and the cherry tree also comes from Parson Weems. But while no scrupulous museum would depict the cherry tree myth as historical fact, this is precisely how the Museum of the Bible presents Washington's prayer. Much like Parson Weems, the makers of this museum want to fabricate the image of a religious Washington, because this narrative is part of a larger agenda. The Washington of legend could not tell a lie. The Museum of the Bible feels no such compunction. Located just 2 blocks off the National Mall, the Museum of the Bible tries to blend in with DC's large networks of Smithsonian museums devoted to natural science, art, and American history. But this museum is entirely different. This is a private institution conceived by the Green family of Oklahoma, the ones who founded Hobby Lobby. Along with their friends, they spent $500 million building a museum with the founding mission to demonstrate the absolute authority and reliability of the Bible. The impersonation of a Smithsonian is intentional. They want their museum, which is full of historical inaccuracies, to appear authoritative, because they are a part of a long, patient campaign to rewrite America's history in order to seize control of our future. The museum reflects an ideology that we as a country, as a Jewish community, and as a congregation need to be talking about. That ideology is Christian nationalism. Let me be abundantly clear about what I do and do not mean. Christian nationalism is the attempt to end American democracy and replace it with Christian theocracy. It is not Christianity as religion, and the majority of America's Christians are not Christian nationalists. As scholar Catherine Stewart explains, Christian nationalism is not a religious creed, but a political ideology which demands that our laws be based not on the reasoned deliberation of our democratic institutions, but on particular idiosyncratic interpretations of the Bible. Christian nationalists intentionally exaggerate Christianity's influence on America's heritage in order to enshrine Christian supremacy in law. As sociologists Andrew Whitehead and Samuel Perry warn, to the extent that Christian nationalist views become reflected in public policy, the growing percentage of Americans who are not Christian will undoubtedly feel ostracized, treated as though they are not fully American. A 2017 Pew Research study asked people how important being Christian was to being considered truly American. 32% responded, very important. To put it another way, a third of our neighbors aren't sure that Jews can be truly American. But this also means that 2/3 of our neighbors reject this un-American idea. That includes the majority of America's Christians. I am not talking about the Christians in this room today. You are here because you are a part of our Jewish family, and your presence adds beauty to our community. And I think it's a safe bet that every one of you agrees that Jews are fully American. I am grateful to the many Christian allies who are standing and declaring that Christian nationalism does not represent them, because they know that this assault on our secular democracy threatens Jews and everyone else. In this moment of toxic polarization and abhorrent political violence, our partnership is more important than ever. The Museum of the Bible is part of a larger mission to rewrite American history. It's what Catherine Stewart calls the great lie at the heart of Christian nationalism, the idea that our founding fathers intended to establish a Christian nation. In this way, they can disguise their movement to build a theocracy as a return to past ideals instead of what it really is, a fundamental reimagining of our country. Whenever Christian nationalists seize political power, they use this narrative as justification. In 2024, nearly 500,000 visitors to the Museum of the Bible were subjected to this revisionist history. There are many indications that the Museum of the Bible is less focused on education and more focused on indoctrination. For example, one of their main attractions is not an exhibit, but a ride, a flight simulator called Washington Revelations, which soars among DC's many monuments and landmarks, hunting for references to the Bible. Unlike a traditional museum exhibit, a ride cannot inspire critical thinking. The propaganda is clear, manipulating visitors into believing that the Bible permeates the American landscape. The ride left me nauseous, and not merely from motion sickness. At one point, we fly through the Jefferson Memorial just long enough to read one of the quotes on the wall. We're told it's a verse from Psalm 145. Except it's not. It's not from anywhere in the Bible that I can find. And also, the ride fails to spin around and look at the quote on the opposite wall from the Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom, which says in part, "No man shall be compelled to frequent or support religious worship or ministry, or shall otherwise suffer on account of his religious opinions or belief." Arguably, this was a more important passage in Jefferson's life. At least, he believed so. Of all his accomplishments, he asked for only 3 to appear on his gravestone: the Declaration of Independence, the creation of the University of Virginia, and the Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom. Jefferson, like many of the founding fathers, was a deist who believed that God never meddled in human affairs. He rejected the organized church. He cut up his personal Bible to remove passages he found offensive. He was, however, deeply committed to founding a secular democracy that protected religious liberty. Virginia's statute for religious freedom became the basis for the First Amendment, and it is Jefferson, in describing this amendment, who coins the phrase, "a wall of separation between church and state." The founding fathers laid the first bricks of that wall. It was a revolutionary idea. Never before in the history of civilization had a government been secular or promised religious freedom to all faiths. This wall has been a blessing to Jews in America. It is what has allowed us and many other religious minorities to thrive here. Though Jews have still experienced discrimination, this wall has protected us from the government-sponsored persecutions and pogroms so prevalent in our history. For 2,000 years, wherever Jews have lived in the diaspora, they have developed strategies for surviving without such a wall of protection. For example, whenever a new leader came to power, the Jews would write to him and ask him for his benevolence in protecting their vulnerable community. In 1790, the Hebrew congregation of Newport, Rhode Island, sent just such a letter to George Washington. They asked the newly inaugurated president to grant them religious tolerance. Washington, in his reply, seems almost taken aback by the request. He says that in America, we do not merely tolerate minorities. He writes, "It is now no more that toleration is spoken of, as if it were by the indulgence of one class of people that another enjoyed the exercise of their inherent natural rights. For happily the government of the United States gives to bigotry no sanction, to persecution no assistance." The wall of separation between church and state makes this promise possible. Last Shabbat in the Haftorah, we read the words of the prophet Isaiah, who declares that the Shomrim al Chomot, the watchers on the wall, must never be silent. When it comes to the wall separating church and state, we are the watchers on the wall. We must not be silent. Many of you have heard that my family is a plaintiff in the lawsuit against our state's new law requiring that every public school classroom permanently display the Christian version of the Ten Commandments. I joined this lawsuit as a private citizen and not in my role as a rabbi of this synagogue, but I also know that what I do reflects on this congregation, and so I want to explain why we joined the suit. A religious text has no place on the walls of a public school classroom. As a parent and a rabbi, I believe that our children's religious education should happen in our homes and in our religious school. The law prescribes specific language which is not only religious, it is explicitly Christian. While Jews, Protestants, and Catholics all started with the Hebrew Bible, our different traditions of translation and interpretation have created conflicting versions of the Ten Commandments. For example, the sixth commandment, or fifth if you're Catholic, because we can't even agree on the numbering, reads Lo tirtzach, which Jews translate as you shall not murder. The Jewish understanding is that this commandment forbids the taking of innocent life, but Jewish law allows for killing in self-defense and capital punishment under certain circumstances. Many Christian Bibles eliminate this nuance and translate the verse simply as thou shalt not kill. The law also cuts out the first commandment's reference to God freeing the Israelites from slavery, which is essential to the Jewish understanding of covenant. It removes the fourth commandment's prohibition of work on Shabbat. It is clear that the bill mandates a version of the Ten Commandments for every public school that is a Christian text. When government officials elevate a particular religion's text, they communicate to students that it is authoritative. The coercion is clear that this is the state's preferred religious doctrine. Our kids will be confronted with Christian scripture every day, put in every one of their classrooms to make them feel like they don't belong. Recently, we were relieved when a judge in San Antonio declared the law unconstitutional and stopped it from going into effect. Unfortunately, his injunction only applies to the specific school districts of the families named in the case, which includes HISD. The fight is not over. The state's attorney general has appealed the ruling, and while we wait for the case to be heard by the circuit court, he has also demanded that the posters be hung in all districts not named in the suit. The Ten Commandments are a beloved symbol of Christian nationalists. The tablets are the logo of the Museum of the Bible. Christian nationalists want to nail the Ten Commandments to the walls of our public schools in order to put a crack in the wall of separation between church and state. Crack by crack, they aim to destroy the wall, as we have seen all too frequently in Texas over the last few years. Prayer in public schools, a crack in the wall. Public school chaplains, another crack in the wall. A state-sponsored curriculum that repeats the same lies as the Museum of the Bible, more cracks in the wall. And I'm only talking today about public education, which is but one place of many where Christian nationalists lay siege to the wall. They will keep hammering away at the wall until the wall crumbles and they can fully seize the power they so desperately desire. My family and I joined the lawsuit because we feel it is our duty as proud Jewish Americans to be watchers on the wall. We will not be silent. The proponents of this bill say it expresses Judeo-Christian values. We must not let Christian nationalists co-opt Judaism as a shield. As First Amendment lawyer Andrew Seidel explains, too often the Judeo in Judeo-Christian is a fig leaf tossed about to avoid controversy and complaint. It is simply a morsel of inclusion offered to soften the edge of an exclusionary Christian movement. Last year, a Texas lawmaker defended a nativity scene on public property by saying that it was an expression of America's Judeo-Christian value. What part of displaying Jesus' birth is a Judeo-Christian value? At the Museum of the Bible, as I neared the end, I turned a corner and saw a series of glass cases. As I walked closer, I gasped. A screen nearby declared the Museum of the Bible has over 200 decommissioned Torah scrolls from the 17th to 19th century. There is no such thing as a decommissioned Torah scroll. A scroll is either kosher and, God willing, in use by a Jewish community, or it is rendered unusable by wear or damage, and then it is repaired or buried. The Torah is our most sacred object. We treat it with the utmost dignity, wrapping it in fine cloth and silver. But in this museum, our scrolls are simply historical remnants, useful only to prop up the Christian nationalist view of the Bible. They are displayed uncovered on racks as if they were old bottles of wine in a cellar. There is no such thing as a decommissioned Torah scroll. A placard beneath the scrolls boasted that they had been saved from burial in a geniza. Burying a Torah scroll with all the respect we show a human is the final ritual in the life cycle of a sacred object. Our scrolls do not need saving from Jewish ritual use. As I stood in that $500 million monstrosity of a museum and I looked at the undignified display of Jewish sacred scripture, I understood that Christian nationalism poses an urgent and present threat both to our American democracy and to the Jewish community's place in it. In the conclusion of her book, The Power Worshippers, Catherine Stewart offers some hope. She says that Christian nationalism's greatest lie is also its greatest weakness. The wall of separation between church and state is not a modern fiction, as Christian nationalists falsely claim. It is written into the Constitution and carved into our history. It is a principle essential to securing the lasting peace and prosperity of America's irreducibly pluralistic society. We don't need to find a new principle. We just need to reclaim the genuine religious freedom that our founders established and that most of our citizens cherish. I am not asking you to file a lawsuit, but I want to suggest 3 ways that we can each act in our own spheres of influence. First, we can learn to recognize Christian nationalism and the subtle ways it operates in so many of our political and cultural debates. As one of our options on Yom Kippur afternoon, Al Khan, Rabbi David Siegel, and I will lead a conversation on this topic. And I encourage you to read The Power Worshippers. I think it's the best book for revealing the movement's history, modern expressions, and future implications. Because the second step is talking about Christian nationalism. Whether we're talking to our families or elected officials, it's important that we learn to name Christian nationalism's dangerous deceptions. In November, I'll be hosting a book club discussion of the power worshipers for all of us to practice using language that can sometimes feel intimidating. And once we've practiced that language, we can do the third thing, which is admittedly harder. We have to talk to our Christian friends about the threat of Christian nationalism. Jews cannot fix this on our own. There are not enough of us. And also, I believe that while we are qualified to tell people that Christian nationalism is un-American, it's not our place to tell people it's un-Christian. But there are many mainline Christians who are saying precisely this. Organizations like Christians Against Christian Nationalism are speaking out. If we want to make a change, we have to ask our Christian friends what they've done to educate themselves. Ask them if they've heard their churches denounce Christian nationalism. Ask them if they are calling out their fellow Christians who make accommodations for Christian nationalist policies. I have resolved to spend 5786 asking these tough questions to my friends who are Christian clergy. I encourage you to talk to your friends too. I did not go to D.C. last January to visit the Museum of the Bible or to learn about Christian nationalist attempts to undermine democracy. I went for the opposite purpose, to bring our 11th graders to the Litakane seminar. From the Hebrew word tikkun, repair. We teach them that when they advocate for a more just and inclusive society, it is a tikkun, a repair of our broken world. And when they share their unique Jewish values and perspectives, and other people from other faiths do the same, it is a tikkun, a repair of our nation. To ensure that the wall that separates church and state continues to stand, we must be watchers on the wall, but we must do more than just watch. We must make a tikkun. We must repair our democracy so that it honors diversity, upholds pluralism, and celebrates civil disagreement. We must repair our democracy so that people of all faiths and none can express their beliefs and advocate for their values. Washington concluded his letter to the Newport Synagogue by speaking their language with a quote from Tanakh. He says that religious freedom in America will bring about Micah's prophetic words, "Everyone shall sit in safety under his own vine and fig tree, and there shall be none to make him afraid." The wall of separation, which ensures religious freedom, makes that promise of safety possible, and it is being chiseled away. We are the watchers on the wall. We can repair what has been broken. We must not be silent.